So it's time for an update on the case of the state of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin. Now, everybody knows that he was convicted on all 3 counts for causing the death of George Floyd. What isn't known is what his prison sentence will be. But we now have some insight after the filing of sentencing memorandums by both the prosecution and the defense. And you're going to learn all about what was in them in today's episode. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the upcoming sentencing of Derek Chauvin. Number one, we're going to talk about what has happened since the trial ended. And we're going to talk about those aggravating factors that potentially could increase the sentence and the prison time. Then we're going to talk about sentencing guidelines and how they work in Minnesota. We're going to take a look at what was in the sentencing memorandums. Those are the written documents that were filed by both the prosecution and the defense. And last but not least, we're going to look at a probable sentence for Derek Chauvin. If you enjoy the episode, hit that like button for me. If you got something to say, comment below. And I would encourage you to predict what you think the potential sentence in this case will be. If you'd like to learn more about this or other legal topics, subscribe to the channel. And as always, I love it when you guys share me on social media. First and foremost, let's do a quick recap. Now, we all know that Derek Chauvin was convicted in April of 2021 of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter after pressing his knee against Floyd's neck for about 9.5 minutes. As Floyd said he couldn't breathe, went motionless, and then ultimately passed away. Floyd's death was captured on widely seen bystander video, and it set off demonstrations around the United States and beyond. Now that we have guilt established by the jury, we turn our attention to the punishment or the sentencing in the case. And even though Chauvin was found guilty of 3 different counts or 3 different crimes, it was one act that he's guilty of. So the sentences will most likely run concurrently, which means they'll run at the same time. So in those types of a situation, for all practical purposes, he's really only being sentenced for the most serious charge, and that would be the second-degree murder. But the range of punishment for that charge is up to 40 years in prison. Now, under Minnesota's sentencing guidelines, a person with no criminal record faces a presumptive sentence for this type of a crime of 12.5 years. Now, Judge Peter Cahill can sentence Chauvin to as little as 10 years and 8 months or up to 15 years and still stay within these guidelines. But prosecutors have asked for what is known as an upward departure, saying that there were several aggravating factors that warrant a sentence higher than the guidelines. And after a hearing, Judge Cahill agreed. He found that Chauvin treated Floyd with particular cruelty. He abused his position of authority as a police officer. He committed his crime as a part of a group of 3 or more. The crime was committed in the presence of children, and the crime was to a particularly vulnerable victim because he was handcuffed at the time. Any one of those factors could warrant a sentence above the guideline range, and the judge found 5. In advance of the June 25th sentencing date, both parties have filed their sentencing memorandums. And this details in writing their arguments for what they deem to be an appropriate sentence. Now, prosecutors aren't asking for the maximum. They are seeking a 30-year sentence for former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. The defense, they're just asking that he be sentenced to probation and time already served between the date of the jury's guilty verdict when he was taken into custody and the date of sentencing, which is about 65 days. In its memorandum, the prosecutors said that Chauvin's actions were egregious and that a sentence of 30 years would properly account for the profound impact of the defendant's conduct on the victim's family, and the community. Now, the defendant's sentencing memorandum was a little more detailed. Defense attorney Eric Nelson cited Chauvin's lack of a criminal record and support from family and friends in requesting a sentence of probation and time served. Nelson further wrote that Mr. Chauvin was unaware that he was even committing a crime. In fact, in his mind, he was simply performing his lawful duty in assisting other officers in the arrest of George Floyd. The memorandum went on to say that Chauvin's offense can be best described as an error made based upon experience and training he received, and it was not the intentional commission of a crime. The sentencing memorandum went into more detail, talking about Chauvin's age, he's 45, and that it should weigh in his favor when determining a sentence, as the life expectancy of a police officer is generally shorter than males of the general population. Now, I found that to be an interesting argument. While I have argued that advanced age sometimes warrants a shorter sentence, I have never argued this reduced life expectancy in a case where my client was the one who dramatically reduced the life expectancy of the victim. This seems like an argument that the prosecution may stick where Nelson's sun don't shine, if you know what I mean. Now, legal pundits have said there is zero chance of Chauvin getting straight probation. And they've also said that prosecutors are unlikely to get the 30 years that they are requesting. Personally, I anticipate that the sentencing will be a lot closer to the 30 years than to probation. After all, the judge did find 5 aggravating factors. But no matter what the sentence that Chauvin gets, in Minnesota, with good behavior, the defendant will serve 2/3 of the penalty in prison and the rest on supervised release, is what we call parole. Now, the defense has also filed a few other motions. Nelson filed a motion for a new trial, which is a fairly routine request after a conviction, arguing that the extensive pretrial publicity tainted the jury pool and denied Chauvin his right to a fair trial. He also argued that the court erred when it declined to move the trial out of Minneapolis and to sequester the jury. Although it's very unlikely that Judge Cahill will sustain any of these motions, it does set those issues up for appeal. The defense is also asking for a hearing to investigate whether there was juror misconduct in this case. And this is based upon an alternate juror who made public comments that she felt pressured to render a guilty verdict, and another juror who was not candid during jury selection about participating in a Martin Luther King Jr. demonstration. And recall that Chauvin has also been indicted on federal charges alleging that he violated Floyd's civil rights, while the other 3 officers, they still have state court charges pending, as well as now federal charges. So that's where things stand leading up to the formal sentencing date of June 25th, 2021. And after the sentence is pronounced, then Chauvin will have the right to appeal the case. But an appeal does not stay or stop the sentence. So he will be serving his time as the case makes its way through the appellate process. So that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed the information. If you got something to say, if you got a comment about what you think the probable sentence will be, put it in the comment section below. I'm gonna go with 28 years. I don't practice in Minnesota. I don't know this judge, but just on a hunch, I'm going with 28 years. So let me know what you guys think about a potential sentence. And if you want to learn more about legal topics, remember to subscribe to the channel. My name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.
Send lawyers, guns, and money.